Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this last session of the workshop. There is a Chinese saying that the best come last. So let me just introduce this session's moderator, Mrs. Carrie Lam, who is the Secretary for Development for the Hong Kong SAR government. She is actually in charge of all land, infrastructure, and building matters in Hong Kong. Let's welcome Mrs. Lam. And let me introduce myself. I am Andrew Chan, here as the chairman of the Hong Kong Green Building Council, but I get paid by a firm called Arab. I am the co-moderator this afternoon.
Well, thank you, Andrew, for introducing me as this last and concurring session on buildings moderator. Well, as Secretary for Development, I must have done dozens of keynote speeches on various occasions, but this is the first time that I'm invited to be a moderator, so I hope you will excuse me if I am not moderating very effectively. Particularly, I've been unwell for the whole week. So with your tolerance, I hope that we have a very fruitful session to round up this very exciting and very important C40 workshop on climate change. Well, first of all, let me, on behalf of the Hong Kong SAR government, welcome all of you to the C40 workshop on climate change and to this particular session on buildings. As you know, buildings and electric vehicles are the two main themes chosen by us in this particular workshop, because both Edward Yao and myself are pressing ahead with various initiatives under these two respective areas. And today's session's theme is the future of new builds. So we have, I'm sure, very eminent speakers to share with us their views on how we can make our new buildings greener. But just let me start by saying a bit about what we are doing as a government in promoting new green buildings in Hong Kong. I start with a little editorial in the SCMP, which many of you may have read this morning, talking about our green prison, as if this government only builds green buildings which are prisons. I can assure you that's not the case, although as the Secretary for the Architectural Services Department, who is winning this award, I am very pleased. In fact, I hand out the award to the Architectural Services Department for this award-winning Law Wu Correctional Institute, which is Rehabilitation Institute for Women Inmates 2 days ago in the Green Building Award 2010, organized by the Hong Kong Green Building Council, chaired by Dr. Andrew Chan. We have been actually doing a lot in promoting green buildings in a government setting. So before we adopted the BEAM Plus assessment launched by the Hong Kong Green Building Council, we already have at least 15 government buildings that were given either excellent or very good rating under its former incarnation, that is the Hong Kong BEAM, accorded by the Hong Kong BEAM Society. And these buildings include court buildings, staff quarters, government offices, and even a public health laboratory. Since the BEAM version 203 came into effect, we actually had 5 government buildings that were rated platinum. That is the highest in the BEAM assessment, and another 3 buildings that were rated gold. And then since 2008, when a later BEAM 204 version came into effect, we have a total of 22 projects in progress that is awaiting to be assessed fully by the rating organization. And I'm happy to say that while we are waiting for the final results, already we have 5 provisional platinum buildings in the government system. And we have put forward ourselves 2 very major projects to undergo the BEAM Plus assessment that I've just mentioned to you, which was launched in April this year. And they are the international cruise terminal that we are building at the Kai Tak development, designed by Norman Foster, and a Custom and Excise Departmental Quarters building. To take this piece of work further, the Secretary for Environment, Edward Yao, and myself, we have jointly issued a technical circular last year to promulgate a framework for how the government can set a good example in promoting green buildings. And some of the key features within this framework is we will require all our new builds to reach the second highest standard or above in going through any internationally renowned assessment, whether it's US LEED or the Hong Kong BEAM Plus, now conferred by the Hong Kong Green Building Council. In terms of energy efficiency, as you know, we are having a piece of legislation undergoing scrutiny by Legislative Council to mandate the Energy Efficiency Code, which has been promulgated by Electrical and Mechanical Services Department for a decade. We set for ourselves an example or a target to outperform the Energy Efficiency Code by 5 or 10% at least. We have also committed ourselves to carry out ongoing and continuous carbon audits in the government buildings. And lately, in order to move forward from green buildings and individual building to a green neighborhood, at the Kai Tak development, we have set for ourselves the ambition that Kai Tak will be green and vibrant and full of leisure and heritage. So we are building the first seawater district cooling system in the Kai Tak development, which I believe Edward might have mentioned in one of his speeches in the last couple of days. But all these work are confined to the public sector. The private sector needs also to do its own piece. So if there's one comment in the SCMP article this morning that I agree is this resetting of priorities by the community as a whole. So it is not only the government that should set an example and press ahead with green buildings. I think developers, professionals, or even members of the public should have a better appreciation and support of the importance of building green buildings. And this is a very timely occasion for me to just share with you what we are doing in the private sector to promote green buildings. Because 3 weeks ago, when the Chief Executive announced his policy address on the 13th of October, we announced a package of measures to foster quality and environmentally sustainable built environment in Hong Kong. So in a nutshell, from 1st April next year onwards, we will be mandating several important building designs in new buildings. One is to stipulate the minimum green coverage, or you call green ratios in other places. Second is for buildings or developments on narrow streets, there will be compulsory building setback so as to mitigate the heat island effect. And thirdly is to require building separation or better building permeability, supported by air ventilation assessments if needed. The second area is, of course, to continue to enhance our efforts in energy efficiency. So we will tighten up the OTTV standards in our new buildings, and Edward's Bureau will continue to use the Environment and Conservation Fund to induce more carbon audits and energy efficiency in private developments. Then finally, in GFA concessions, which is a topic very often talked about these days in the public domain and by developers, I have to say that in tackling GFA concessions, we are not sort of taming an evil. I don't think GFA concessions as a policy is a bad thing, because that is a very pragmatic way to induce better designs in Hong Kong and in fact in other cities. So what we are doing is only to making sure that each feature or facility that we are granting exemptions from GFA, accountable GFA, it is fulfilling the objective of sustainability, of green and energy efficiency. So just to give you an example which fits in very well with the two themes that we are conducting in this workshop. In future, if we are going to grant GFA concessions for car parks, we require the car parks to be EV enabled, so that electrical vehicles, when it becomes a more common use in Hong Kong, we don't have to worry whether we have enough charging stations in Hong Kong. And secondly, for example, in allowing for wider corridors, we said that the corridors better have some natural ventilation before we give you some GFA concessions. But the most important measures, there are two of them, which will help to publicize or promote this education aspects. First is we will require the new builds to go through the BEAM Plus assessment to be conferred upon by the Hong Kong GBC. So that in future, we will know the green rating of each of the new build in Hong Kong. And secondly is to require developers to give an estimate when they submit building plans on the estimated energy consumption in that particular project, especially for commercial project, as well as for the common areas in the residential projects. And both of these pieces of information will be mandated for disclosure. So they have to be revealed to prospective buyers when the project is put into the market. So with that, a very short update. I hope that I have impressed upon you that we are very serious about our job, and also we want to make a contribution as a city to this very ambitious work of the C40 conference and the workshop. So without further ado, I want to go into the formal session for you to hear what our experts have to say. I'm very fortunate this afternoon to have Andrew as my co-moderator, especially if I fall asleep or I have to step out of the room, then Andrew will come to my rescue. Andrew has introduced himself. He is the inaugural chairman of the Hong Kong Green Building Council, deputy chairman of the Arab Group, immediate past president of the Hong Kong Institute of Engineers, and member of the Hong Kong Construction Industry Council. And the first speaker that I want to introduce to you is Professor Tang Zilai 教授. Professor Tang is a professor and head of the Department of Urban Planning in the Tongji University. He is also the chief planner of the Urban Best Practice Area in the Shanghai Expo 2010, which has just recently concluded very successfully. Professor Tang has also worked in various positions, including the Jurong Town Corporation in Singapore, and is currently the chairperson of the Planning Expert Advisory Group in the Shanghai Municipal Government. So let's welcome Professor Tang.